Hi, Mo. I'm great. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining in this wonderful interview series. Kris came into our world when she was overseas
Yep.
and working in a very complicated environment. And she knew that there was something more and different that she wanted to get into. Kris, tell us a little bit about your story, and then we'll dive right into some other stuff.
Sure. So I'm Kris. Hi, everyone. Welcome. And let's see. I moved to Washington, D.C. from California in 2009 to pursue a graduate fellowship in D.C. I was getting my PhD, moved here for what was supposed to be a 2-year fellowship. And that was 2009, so right during the Great Recession.
Yes.
And my 2-year fellowship got cut to a 1-year fellowship. And to make a long story short, I had to completely rethink what I thought would be my career plan back then. And I ended up getting a job with the Department of Defense. And I worked in the Department of Defense and intelligence community as a counterterrorism analyst and researcher for about 7 years. And then I decided, I knew all along that working for DoD, although it was wonderful, and you feel like you are a real patriot, like you're working for the Department of Defense.
Right.
And you're working with our military and our intel professionals, and they're such great people, and they do such great things for our country, and we owe them our freedom. But at the end of the day, my personal values just didn't align with defense. Like, I didn't agree with killing people, even though they be terrorists or whatever.
Right.
That's just not me. I'm a peace builder at heart. I don't want to kill people. I want to see like justice being served.
Yeah.
So I moved to work on the development side of the U.S. government, working as an implementing partner for the U.S. Agency for International Development. And I went from being a counterterrorism analyst to doing countering violent extremism work. So that is trying to break recruitment patterns for terrorist organizations and work to address the root causes of terrorism before it becomes an issue that the Department of Defense then has to deal with.
Right.
So I was doing that work at a great place in Washington, D.C., and I loved it. I loved the team. They were fantastic, almost all women, actually, and a lot of young women. So I had a lot of I'm pretty young too. I'm in my 30s, but
Yeah, right.
like 20-year-olds out of college who just had such great energy and were so incredibly intelligent. It was just a fabulous, wonderful, very rewarding work environment. And I was finally like doing work that aligned with my values, which is really, really important to me anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm minding my own business, and in 2018, loving my job, and in 2018, a recruiter called me with a very similar project based in Ghana, and implementing a research and learning project on countering violent extremism work for the U.S. Agency for International Development in West Africa. So I took a long shot. I didn't know of the company, and I had never worked with that mission in USAID before. So I took a leap of faith, even though in my gut I was very apprehensive, and so many things happened when I was trying to move to Ghana that were red flags, but I just kept trucking. And for the first year there in 2018 to 2019, it was great. I had a really good boss. She was also a young, dynamic, just very energetic and really smart woman. And she knew the company very well. And so we made a good team, and we worked really well together, and we were able to move the project forward so much that we ended up spending 4 years of funding in 2 years.
Oh, wow.
But that meant that we were killing ourselves, and it was really just her and I running this, and she got so burned out she ended up leaving towards the end of 2019. And then I was really burned out, and the client loved us. We got one of the best ratings that the company had ever received from a client. But it was really at our own detriment.
Yeah.
And so it was within this burned out, chaotic craziness where my beloved boss left, and I felt like I had lost like a true partner.
Yeah.
I was devastated, and I had to also reorganize my whole team in Ghana. My boss was based in DC. So my whole team that like had worked with her for a few months, they were devastated. And all this is happening while I have to travel all over West Africa. Like I was going from Mali to Niger to Burkina Faso to Cote d'Ivoire to Benin, Togo, Guinea. I was all over the freaking place.
And these are big countries that are separated by a lot of empty space. It's not like traveling around the US where you can just like drive from Chicago to Indiana.
No, this is like taking hot, smelly airplanes that are old. Like, I don't want to denigrate African Airlines. Nothing ever crashed. And while I was out there, Boeing Airlines crashed and killed people. But, you know, the AC, you have to turn it off when you land. So you're sitting on a hot tarmac in Africa, sweltering in the heat.
Yeah.
And people are pissed off about that, understandably. So, and just like, you can't, we call them air taxis because if you're trying to go from, say, Ghana to Mali, you have to stop, you know, 2 or 3 times. You have to stop in Togo, and then again in Burkina Faso, and then maybe also in Niger, and then you get up to Bamako finally to where you're trying to go. So these are long flights. Telecommunications is spotty, so it's hard to keep a connection with your team. So anyway, these were the dynamics I found myself in.
Yeah.
My beloved boss left.
Yes.
And then I got a new boss, and it did not go well. It was the first time in my career that I didn't get along with a boss, and that even if we had disagreements, like I couldn't overcome them and make a comeback with her. And so I was one of those people that found myself every day wanting to quit, just quit, pack my stuff, get on a plane and go back to America. Be like, I give up, I'm done.
Right. Yeah.
So I remember sitting in our house in Ghana in December of last year, of 2019, thinking I'm either gonna quit or I'm gonna get a coach. And like, I had a coach actually, but I'm going to get a different coach to help me figure.
Someone who can help me figure this out. Yeah.
Yeah. And that day, that was in the morning, that day I saw a Facebook ad for your like free Facebook, whatever you call it, webinar.
Yeah.
And I watched it, and that right afterwards, I was like, I need a clarity call. So I got my clarity call with Michelle and signed up for coaching that day and didn't look back. And all during the fall last year, I had been applying for jobs on my own. I knew I couldn't take it anymore. Like it was going to start affecting my health. I could feel it coming. And I was like, I have to make a change. And so I had been applying for jobs. I had come in second many times, but never the bride. And within, I think, the first 3 or 4 weeks of the workshop, I applied to my current company. And it was the 5th time I think I had applied, and I had interviewed in the fall for a different job with that company and been rejected. So I applied again. I got 2 free interviews and I got the job.
Yes. What happens often, and you know this now, well, you may have known it a little bit beforehand, but when we're coming from a place of desperation or kind of
Mhm.
this self-doubt, anger, frustration, like that's the energy in which we are applying to anything that we're doing, let alone applying
Yeah.
for a new job. We're taking that energy forward. And that has to get cleared up in order for you to be at your most brilliant self. And, when you're in the soup, if you will, it's tough to reframe yourself so that you are in the energetic sense of self of your best self, that you are feeling possibility and positivity oriented. When you started making some shifts, what else did you notice was going on within you or your environment, or how was your stress level kind of migrated when you started just feeling better about yourself and not feeling as desperate and I got to quit?
Yeah, so I completely agree with that. I felt desperate. I was like, please God, anybody give me a job, please. I gotta get out of here.
Anything.
Just get me out of here. It was
Right.
I was like, this is kind of pathetic, but how I'm feeling. And so that's how I was applying for jobs in the fall, and I felt that.
Mhm.
I felt
Yeah.
desperate.
Yeah.
And I knew it was coming through. Like
Mhm.
I could just tell I wasn't me. I
Yes.
didn't feel like me.
Right.
And
Right.
so actually I knew all the techniques. I have been meditating for years every
Mhm.
day.
Yep.
I do journal. I do a lot of the techniques that you teach us, but
Uh-huh.
I think for me personally, it was having the community and
Mhm.
having
Yeah.
other people. Like I could call, you know, 4 different coaches
Mhm.
to get
Right.
help, or
Right.
I could lean into the group and get encouragement or whatever
Mhm.
I needed.
Mhm.
And I can't tell you how much that was important for my journey, because
Mhm.
I was living in Ghana. We had friends there. Our good friends had all left. You know, people rotate
Mhm.
through these expat communities a lot.
Yeah.
We had made really good friends, and they all left around the same time that my boss quit.
Oh. Mhm.
So like my whole support structure crumbled within a few weeks.
Yeah.
And so it was really lonely out there. I felt
Mhm.
very lonely, even though my partner was with me and we had some other good friends in Ghana. It just
Mhm.
wasn't the same.
Yeah.
So the community was really important.
That's a really, really significant ingredient in the work that we do. As you know, um, women in particular need a sense of safety and support to be able to express a different version of themselves. Because what tends to happen is that when we get shut down or we're upset or angry or frustrated, we've shut the best parts of ourselves down. And where do we now express that? Nowhere. So it keeps getting more and more repressed and shut down. And when you have this community where you're not alone and you hear other women expressing the same things, you just feel the sense of openness and relief. And now you can have some openness, not only with the coaches, but with peers, where you're not isolating yourself anymore. And that environment's like fertile soil to grow in. And
Yeah.
hundreds, if not probably thousands of psychological studies about the value of having your support groups to facilitate change and a transformation for human beings. But it is definitely one of the things I'm most proud of. And of course, as you know, the continuing sisterhood of all the gals who've been in the workshop is something I'm really, really happy and proud to foster and keep going, because that is an ongoing, necessary, cool part about the journey keeps going.
Yeah.
So you had quite a dramatic transition once you landed your dream job and you got in this organization, and you accepted the offer. All of a sudden, COVID hits, and now there's complications about getting back to the U.S. and starting your
Yeah.
new job. And I got to say, witnessing you go through that, you were quite the evolved woman. I know it wasn't always super easy for you, but you navigated that in such a way that was inspiring, not only for me, but also the other women who are on this journey with you. And talk about that a little bit, because you were a more powerful version of you as you were going through that. And it was just fascinating and wonderful to watch you handle that difficulty.
Yeah. So I had my whole plan. You know, I have a PhD. We come with a plan.
Right,
And I
exactly.
had my whole plan. I accepted my job at like the end of February, and then I was going to start at the beginning of May, but I was going to move. I was finishing up one big, huge project, and it was all going to culminate in this week-long series of briefings in Washington, D.C. with all the big people that do this work.
Yeah.
And it involved 5 countries in West Africa. So we had already started we called it a roadshow of briefing the results of our study to these 5 countries. So we had done Benin in February. And in February, we were flying through these airports and we were getting our temperature taken, and we were filling out COVID forms in case they needed to do contact tracing. So then we went to Guinea to do the brief, and while we were in Guinea, they started talking about shutting everything down. We flew back from Guinea in mid-March, and I think 3 days later, Ghana closed its borders. So thank God we got back, or we would have been stuck in Guinea or God knows where.
Right.
But Ghana closed its borders in March, and we didn't get out. We tried, but we didn't get out. And so once the borders closed, and they stayed closed until September. Once the borders closed, there's no getting out unless it's on an expat flight that's organized by the government. Well, we had pets, so we couldn't leave on one of those until we got our pets out. So that was an ordeal. So that took several weeks of negotiating with cargo planes to get them out, and that was a whole thing. Everyone on the Badass group saw my meltdowns felt that. I was one stressed out pet parent.
Right.
Oh my God. Anyway, that's a long story. I won't go into the details, but it was very stressful.
Yeah.
But then we were stuck there. We couldn't get an expat flight out. The US government only organized a few of them, and they didn't really even organize one in April. So May came, and I'm like, I was supposed to start my job on May 4th.
Right.
But there was no way for us to get out, and I couldn't start from there because it was very complicated. Anyway, I had to keep working for my old company until we left. It was basically like the rules. So it was a lot of negotiation with both of them about how this was going to work. And then finally the US organized an expat flight. We went to the airport. We waited in line for 4 hours. We didn't not to get on that plane. And so we were really stressing out, and had to go back home after we had told all our neighbors adios.
Right. We're back.
And anyway, 2 days later, thankfully because we had friends with someone in the Canadian High Commission, we got out on a Canadian expat flight, and then that was a whole ordeal, but we finally got home, and we didn't get COVID, and everything was fine in the end.
Yeah. And you land back home in DC and get back in your house and start your job.
Yep.
And a new life just sort of like began happening as you kind of refreshed yourself into this new identity that was just delayed because of this interesting little thing called a pandemic.
Yeah.
What have you noticed perhaps differently or more enhanced about navigating your role in your new job? Perhaps that's a different version of Kris that you bring to the table now.
Mm-hmm. Well, now that I've been in a truly high stressed out position that I never want to go back to, and towards the end of that whole thing, like I said, we had spent all our funding, and so we had very little work to do by the time I left. So I was working honestly like part-time.
Mm-hmm.
I did not have enough to do to fill up my
Sure.
time.
Yeah.
And I was totally cool with that. It felt great. I was like, I've never been subscribed to the you have to kill yourself to succeed school. But in that job, I just felt the pressure to do it. Plus, the work was, well, I hope it was helping to transform lives in a very meaningful way. So you really felt driven
Yeah.
to do it as fast as possible to the best ability possible because it could actually help save lives and make a difference in people's lives.
Right.
But it came at a huge cost, and I think it would have been fine with the support system. So what I've brought from that experience into this job is like most everything is not that serious. We don't have to get upset about anything here. Like, it's all good.
Yeah.
What can we just do to move forward as a team and not have any unnecessary conflict or drama?
Yes.
I think conflict is healthy, but unnecessary drama.
Right. Right.
And how can we make sure that we have adequate resources and actually put our foots down if we don't and say, we're not going to do this, especially in this environment. Like, my new boss is great. She's got a 2-year-old at home. We're just not going to kill ourselves for this.
Right.
It's really important work, but it's also really important that you don't kill your best people.
Yes.
And I love that our current organization gets that.
Yeah. You know, the humaneness of the place where you're working and the work that you're doing is still pretty globally important and impactful. But the humaneness of the organization, I think, in the way that we see women evolve in your journey in particular, Kris, you had to come into a place where you were being more humane with yourself in order to be attracted in and feel aligned with the work of that organization. I know they were on your radar screen for a long time, but your own sense of your own self-respect and humanity had to come alive, and you had to prosper from within. Do you find yourself being a little bit easier on yourself, a little bit just easier on yourself as you go along your day and your profession and your work?
Yeah, I think I'm usually pretty easy on myself. I let circumstances dictate too much of what was happening. And I didn't have the skills. That's why I had another coach to like get these skills to help me with this new position. I didn't have the skills at the beginning to say no. And so by the time I had the skills to say no, they were so used to treating me a certain way, it was hard to reverse that.
Yes.
I actually didn't do it effectively.
Yeah.
But now I have the skills, so I can even, like, before it even becomes an issue, just shape it the way that I want it to go.
Right.
And nobody even needs to know the difference.
Yes, exactly. So you're not inviting in the overload and the overwhelm that now managing it's like just a whole nother story, which is really, really a cool way to navigate one's career and just life in general. Just to be able to know what it is that you want, how you want to be in the world, and to just put that out there as you're driving your car of your life. I mean, that's just, to me, that's ultimately what we all are looking for as human beings, is to be in control of how we are in the world, which is different than being in control of circumstances. Because we're going to be hit with stuff.
Totally.
So you're able to navigate and feel powerful and do the things that are necessary for you to continue to evolve in your career. What's next as Kris continues to express who she is in the world and the bigness and power of her soul? What's next for you?
That's a great question. I've been trying to work that out in the Leadership Academy, but
I'm going big.
yeah. Well, ultimately, as we've talked about, I really want to blend two of my passions, my career passion about working in peace building and trying to bring communities together and do a lot of trauma healing with my love of horses. So I have this idea to start an equine therapy center focused on peace building, which I've been doing research. I haven't found anything like that exists. So if you know of anything, let me know so I can look them up.
Hey, people.
But there are, there are lots of equine therapy centers who do like developmental therapy and trauma therapy with veterans who have PTSD. So I've been volunteering with one of those, and we'll learn about how they run their barn and just see how I can leverage my current company to maybe start something like that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's awesome. You also recently published a book that you've been working on for a while.
Yeah.
And you got inspired to study what some women have done to kind of pivot around traditional academic careers. Do you want to just say a few words about that? Because I want to do a shout out to you for having completed something like that, because that's a big deal to finish a project like that and to publish a book and to have not only your thoughts but the compilation of other people's stories pulled together, that it's out there in the world, and that's really cool.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mo.
Yeah.
Yes, I just finished and published a book called Trailblazing. It's about how women with PhDs find jobs or careers, not just jobs, careers outside of academia. And it's part anthology of stories of 28 different women and part advice from the women and myself about how to do this. And the reason I started that book is because after 2009, when I had to go find my own job, and I applied to many academic positions and I didn't even get an interview. Like, it was pretty bad. So, I was open to an academic career. I just didn't get any traction there. And because I don't work there, I've met a lot of women who also have PhDs or who are not in academia. And over time, people started sending me their grad students who either already knew they didn't want to go into academia or had been on the market and didn't get jobs. And so they were forced, like me, to look elsewhere.
Yeah.
So they were sending me these women to mentor. It was almost 99% women to mentor. And I just kept repeating myself. And I was like, why isn't there a book about this? And also, what if my advice is crap and it just worked for me and it's not really valid?
Right.
I don't know. Like, I'm just one data point. And so I started asking around and ended up interviewing some really amazing women. I mean, all of them are amazing.
Yeah.
So it's about their stories to kind of like let people know how this can go, like what it looks like, even if you're in academia and you are a professor and you want to leave because you just want to change or whatever it is that drives you.
Right.
There are stories in there about how that looks through other women. If you're in grad school and you're like, I don't like this environment, I don't want to be an academic for whatever reason, there are stories in there about that. And then if you're like me, there are lots of stories in there about that. And then the advice, there's a lot of standard advice about how to do a resume and how to network.
Yeah.
But I think the more meaningful advice, and I've had a lot of feedback about this, is the kind of attitude and basically energy you need to bring. And really important, there was like a big theme about being of service and not letting yourself be walked on, but also not being too high on your horse. Like, if you need to bring coffee to a meeting, bring coffee to the meeting. It's not going to hurt anything, and it's probably going to help you.
Right.
Which was something I personally chafed at initially, but then I saw the benefit.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah.
So.
It's interesting how just your personal experience not only shaped your career, but now you're able to articulate it and help others along the way. And now you have this this wonderful book, and we'll post the link on one of my Facebook groups or whatever for your book. So if there's women with PhDs who are like, I'd want to learn all of that, we'll post the link
Thanks.
for your book. If you were to give yourself a year or two ago some advice as to what you know now to be true, what you've learned, how you've grown, what advice would you give?
I would tell myself to listen more to myself. Like, I had these feelings all along. And one thing that living in Ghana taught me was, for this career issue, but for a few other things that happened in my personal life while I was there. And every single time I had the voice in the back of my head, like tingling, like, watch, these are red flags, and, or whatever, like,
Yeah.
maybe you should go this direction, but your ego is hell-bent on going this direction. So you're going to go that direction. You're going to see how it crashes and burns.
Uh-huh.
So it's really important to listen to yourself.
Yes. That inner guidance system.
Yeah.
That as we work together and articulate it, it's our divine wisdom that is trying to get our attention. It doesn't speak very loudly.
Yeah. And
the ego is louder. Our fears are louder. And sometimes it seems like we're not supposed to pay attention. It's not as loud as fear. It's not as loud as our ego. And so it gets missed a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah. Or what I was doing to sabotage my own inner voice was I was vetting it with everybody I knew.
Yes.
Because I didn't want to believe it. And I wanted to talk myself into thinking something else.
Yes.
So if everybody else was like, oh yeah, you can go do that other thing, that's fine.
Yeah.
Then I discounted my own.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that is such a common thing. As you've been in my workshop, you've heard other women talk about these very similar things.
Yeah.
You're now in one of our accelerator workshops. So it's a very common thing that as human beings, we get seduced by our fears and our ego. And then let me ask 10 people. And if someone agrees with that little voice, maybe I'll be able to turn up the volume on it. But that doesn't happen because other people bring their fears and ego to your question. So you get amplified on the fear and ego typically.
Yep.
It's a disaster.
And it makes you feel like crap.
Yeah.
Especially when it turns out that you should have listened to yourself.
Right. And that inner voice goes, why are you not paying attention to me? You're like, because you're not as bold as fear. You're not as loud as my ego. And you're not as loud as my friends. They know better.
Yeah.
And that's a common thing that I think women in particular doubt themselves more than men on general. But as we navigate the world, we owe it to ourselves to turn that volume up of that inner voice, don't we? I mean, because that's the highest wisdom we have.
Yeah. And in case you couldn't tell, like, one of my value words is peace.
Yeah.
And my guidance system is normally like a peaceful, what is going to make me calm and peaceful? But the drama of the fear and the whatever and the ego can feel so much more powerful. But one thing I love about COVID is it's kind of forced us all to sit down and be quiet. Like, can't sing, you can't shout, sit down and be quiet. And so I feel like the peaceful voice is having even more time to come out and show me what I've been missing.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I'm delighted to watch your trajectory, to see another woman kind of plucked out of fear and being just not in a good place. I don't mean geographically as much as, having basically burnt yourself out and then having a boss that was just not a good fit and not kind of fueling the best parts of you, to have you pop out of that and totally own your truth and own your strength and just taking all of you up a notch, several notches, so that you can be the more powerful version of you that you were meant to be. And I know you've got a lot more left in your career and in your aspirations for what you want to, the mark you want to make in the world. And it's just a delight to watch you just be the peaceful yet powerful version of you, and just to know that your path continues to unfold in really big, wonderful, awesome ways. And I love knowing you. I love having worked with you and work with you and just keep watching you continue to get stronger and more powerful. The world needs more women like you who are stepping into their power and their grace and their dignity to really make a mark in the world. So thank you for that personally. And thanks a lot for joining us on this interview today. And just really a pleasure, Kris, to know you and for you to share your story. And folks, Kris's story is beautiful and awesome because her soul came alive at a whole nother level. And it just warms me that this is the work of what I do to help all the women who come our way to just open it up. And if you'd like to get a sense of what that looks like, please do watch my free webinar. That's mofall.com/FB Live. You'll get into the webinar. And if you'd like to go ahead and just get into a complimentary career clarity call, that's mofall.com slash, I think it's, whoops, I forgot the URL for that one. mofall.com/live clarity. That'll get you one. That'll get you a clarity call. And that's how this whole beautiful journey starts. We want to really take care to listen as to what's really going on and understand it before we know if there's the right fit to help you out. Kris, thanks again. I hope to see you in person real soon.
I know.
It's on the short list for me to go visit since I have so much family there. But we're all being safe and keeping things safe for a while. But I hope to see you real soon. It's really a pleasure to spend time with you. Thanks again.